Now that Indiana is going into their bye week, where can Indiana improve? This is a big question because when you go into a bye week, you always want to come out on the other side better than when you came in. And Indiana, again, hasn't had the toughest first half of their season, but they had a couple of, interesting games against decent opponents, and they got it done. And Indiana has some flaws. Just like Jeff said earlier, the defense definitely could be better. It's not the worst, but it definitely could be better. But where can Indiana improve overall? When I look at their statistics, about to pull them up on screen right here, because this is to tell the tape for Indiana when it comes to looking at areas that they can improve. The passing game, I don't really think Indiana can basically get much better than what they've been doing. So that's not really an area they need to improve. They've been great in the passing game because Curtis Rourke, he doesn't have like the highest stats of any quarterback in college football, but he is toward the top in every category. Passing touchdowns, he hasn't thrown many picks. He only has 2 picks on the year. He's got 14 touchdown passes, over 1,700 yards. You can't ask for much more from Curtis Rourke. And when you look at the receiving core, which goes hand in hand with the passing game, they only have 1 drop as a team, which is like, I think maybe the lowest in college football. As a whole team, they have 1 drop among all the receivers and tight ends, which is insane. Even the running backs as well. I've never seen that in my life from Indiana. Indiana always has players dropping balls. So they've gotten better all around in the passing game. That does not need to improve. When I look at the running game, they're great in like I said, the offense is great. I think the offense, you can legitimately say that Indiana has a great offense to this point. Now, when they play tougher opponents down the stretch, man, maybe their offense will show some cracks. But so far, I haven't really seen any cracks in their offense. The running game is great. They got 4 running backs that are all legitimately contributing in the offense. Justice Ellis and Tyson Lawton are definitely the 2 guys that stand out the most with yards and carries, but Kalen Black and Elijah Green aren't too bad either when they come into the game. I will say probably from the offense, though, as a whole, the one area that you could say Indiana could improve in would be run blocking. Some of the running backs do grade poorly in Pro Football Focus, which is a site that basically ranks players statistically based off like the reps, like the percentile of like when they catch passes or when they run the ball or blocking. Indiana doesn't grade the best when it comes to run blocking, but it hasn't really mattered because Indiana's offensive line has actually been really solid this year. Indiana's been going with the same 5 offensive linemen, and they've been getting the job done. All 5 of them have been really, really good for Indiana. Carter Smith's the standout guy from the offensive line. He's probably going to be a guy playing on Sundays. He's very talented, definitely big for Indiana that they kept him from transferring this past offseason. But I can't really complain at the O-line. You could, again, maybe say the run blocking from them could be a bit better, but the pass blocking's been good. Obviously, you can improve in small areas everywhere. Like maybe you say route running could be a little bit better for a couple of the depth receivers, but the standout guys like Omar Cooper, Elijah Surratt have been great. But to me, it's just the run blocking from the running backs could be a little bit better, especially like a guy like Tyson Lawton because he's a big back and he actually grades as one of the worst run blockers on the offense, which is kind of crazy. You think he'd be one of the best, but he really hasn't graded all that well, which is kind of bizarre. But I can't really complain much about the offense. So they don't really need to improve all that much. They just need to keep doing what they're doing and have a few tweaks here and there, especially when the competition gets more tough. Then when you look at the kicking game, don't really see any issues there. Nicholas Radicic has been great. Hasn't missed an extra point. Hasn't missed a field goal. So no issues there. Then when you look at defense, the defensive line is better this year for Indiana. Definitely better than it's been basically every single season of the Tom Allen era. That was always been a weakness for Indiana is they don't really have great defensive linemen. They're better on the defensive line this year, especially Mikael Kamara, the transfer from James Madison, followed Cignetti to Indiana. He's a stud. 5 sacks on the season. He's a fantastic player. Absolutely a force on the D-line. I will say, though, besides him, though, the other guys on the D-line, they could be better. But, you knew Indiana wasn't going to be an elite team on the defensive line because they don't have, 5-star guys. That's just not the way that it works. But they do have guys that are underrated. But when you look at like Tyreek Tucker, Linnell Carr, they're not bad. They both have a sack and a half on the season. They're not weak links, and that's good that they don't really have a defensive lineman that's a weak link that just doesn't really get pressure at all. It's just kind of there, has to fill a position. So every single defensive lineman has his purpose, and they do a pretty solid job. But definitely, I would say the D-line could be a bit better outside Mikael Kamara. James Carpenter's been pretty good. He's the secondary guy on the D-line. That's like the second best defensive lineman. But still, the D-line could be better. But you can't complain too much. I have no issues with the linebacking core. Aiden Fisher, Jalen Walker. Now, I will say Jalen Walker got injured against Northwestern. I don't think the injury is severe, but if he's out, then that could be a little bit of an issue for Indiana with another linebacker coming in. Isaiah Jones would have to step up in that regard, but he's not that bad. He just isn't as much of a force as Jalen Walker and Aiden Fisher are. But as long as Jalen Walker is in, Indiana needs no improvement from their linebacking core. Their linebacking core is really, really good, and that's always been a strength for Indiana, even during the Tom Allen era. And then when you talk about the defensive backs, yes, Indiana can improve in the secondary. They're not bad in the secondary, though. But D'Angelo Pons, his biggest issue is that he is a really, really solid DB. He's just short. He's like 5'9". And I think he's going to be playing on Sunday somehow, even though he's undersized and it is very tough to be a standout DB in the NFL at that short a size. It's much better to be at least 6 foot, 6'1". But I do think he will find a way to squeak out playing on Sundays if possible because he's that good of a player. But D'Angelo Pons does get beaten coverage sometimes because of his short stature on deep routes. But when it comes to intermediate stuff and short routes, he's great. Sean Asbury's been pretty solid as well. He's taller, so he can definitely deal with the bigger receivers, but he has grabbed a few times, so he does have a couple pass interferences under his belt. I don't think D'Angelo Pons even has one. He's been that good, but Sean Asbury definitely do a little bit better at not grabbing. And then when you talk about the backup DBs, like Amari Farrell, Josh Sanguinetti, they're not bad. Not weaknesses. Sanguinetti, he's been a part of Indiana's team for years, played under Tom Allen. Amari Farrell, he's a young guy, so he's going to get better with time. But I think Indiana just try to do a little bit better if possible at not grabbing on like getting pass interferences and not getting beat over the top if possible, because they do a pretty good job on run defense. I mean, they did have that one breakdown against Maryland, but that was because of the fact the referee blocked D'Angelo Pons, I guess accidentally, and gave up a 75-yard touchdown run. But other than that play, Indiana's been good in the run defense from the secondary. The pass defense only getting beat over the top a few times, which could come back to bite them when they play better teams like Ohio State. I would say Michigan, but Michigan can't really stretch the D all that much, through the air because of the fact they just don't have great quarterback play right now. So it's kind of tough to say them, but definitely Ohio State. You can say Nebraska, teams like that. Indiana's going to have to do a better job not getting beat downfield, but those are areas Indiana can improve in. I can't say the punting game because James Evans is a really good punter, but they barely had to use him at all because of the fact that Indiana is not punting the ball this year much, which they'll probably have to punt more the second half of the season because they're going to be playing tougher opponents. But you cannot beat the way Indiana has been playing overall and the fact that they barely had to punt. So the punting game's been fine when James Evans has had to punt. And the kickoff game, they do have a couple injuries, so they're starting 2 kickoff guys, which is insane that they're both hurt. And they're on a third-string guy, and he's not as good. He doesn't really kick the ball in the end zone that often on kickoffs as much, so the balls are more returnable. That could be a problem against better teams, so that's something to watch. But again, not too many areas where Indiana can improve. And if I had this segment going into the bye week last year for Indiana with Tom Allen, I would be having a whole list. It'd probably be a 40-minute, 50-minute segment of all the areas Indiana needs to improve on. So really solid that Indiana does have a few areas you need to improve on. Every team does, but not that bad. Mostly just not getting beat over the top in the secondary and a little bit better run blocking, or pass block from the running backs, a little bit better run blocking as well from the running back, when all tight ends as well. So not too bad for Indiana, just very solid overall. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Indiana, and they don't really have too many areas that they need to improve on, but they could always improve just a little bit.